Hello guys, welcome to the project on DevOps. So in this project, we'll be creating a DevOps CI/CD lifecycle. Earlier what used to happen is in the organizations people were following the manual approach to take care of the deployment process, to take care of the different builds, to take care the regular operations related to software deployment processes. One has to use the traditional manual deployment approaches. Well, earlier what used to happen is like for deploying a single application, the deployment guy used to take 4 to 5 hours to deploy a single application. Now with DevOps, this whole task of deploying an application, the time involved reduces to merely 2 to 5 minutes. So the difficulty level for this course will be intermediate one. So you will be requiring some basic skill sets to undergo this project training. Well, you should know Linux because everything in DevOps is totally based on Linux. Then you should know what is a Jenkins tool and how it can be used to configure the different jobs. We'll be highly using this tool to automate our deployment process, what we call it as a CI/CD process. Then we'll be using Git. So various organizations uses different kind of repositories like Bitbucket, then we have GitHub and many more. So in this project we'll be using GitHub, that is openly available and free of cost. So you should be aware about the different Git commands, like how it can be used, how to push code to a repository and the other related things. Then for monitoring purpose, for monitoring our servers that are involved in our project, like we'll be having a Jenkins server, we'll be having one application server. So we'll be using Zabbix as a monitoring tool. So we'll be placing the agents, the Zabbix agent on the different servers, and we'll have a centralized platform where we'll be getting all the details about the CPU, RAM and the different values. So the project objectives involves you will be able to implement the Git repository. Like it's a very basic task for any DevOps guy to set up a repository where the developers can push their codes, can keep their codes and do the different commits. Then we'll be able to implement Jenkins pipeline, what we call it as CI/CD. Then we'll be deploying the application in the containers. The well-known container are the Dockers, so we'll be using Dockers. Then we'll be deploying the Zabbix agent on the different servers to monitor them. And then we'll be automating the deployment process using Ansible. In the end, will be a complete CI/CD pipeline. So the important thing is like what you will be learning in this project. You'll be able to articulate what DevOps is. You will identify the value of DevOps lifecycle, then why Jenkins is used. So we'll be building CI/CD pipeline using Jenkins. So these are the takeaways. Then the monitoring servers and applications using Zabbix. So keeping in mind all these things that we are going to do in this project, so are there any project requirements or prerequisites? We have, the student should know the basic Linux commands. They must have a basic idea of cloud computing. Then what is Git and repositories involved, like any repository you use like GitHub, Bitbucket, then Jenkins, and the monitoring tool like Zabbix, since we are using Zabbix. So it's not required to go for Zabbix only. There are many tools available in the market, like you have Prometheus and Grafana, then Nagios and many more. So who are the target students? So participants working in IT industry who wants to scale up their career into DevOps. Then those interested in implementing a DevOps lifecycle, engineering managers who want to remain updated with the latest technology, and the college students wanting to build their career in DevOps. So by the end of this project, you will have the following skill sets. You will have an excellent understanding of DevOps lifecycle. You'll get to know how to implement Jenkins CI/CD pipelines, then how to monitor servers. In our case, we are using Zabbix. You can use the same knowledge and apply the same concept using other tools like Nagios or Prometheus, Grafana. then what are Ansible scripts, how they are written, and how to do continuous deployment or configuration management using Ansible. So we have divided this course in some parts. So the project contents will be the source code management. In this part, we'll be setting up the Git repository. We'll be using GitHub extensively. Then Jenkins, this is the central thing that we'll be using to do CI/CD, the continuous integration, and the continuous deployment. Then we'll be using Docker containers for deploying our application, because nowadays, since last 2-3 years, the whole software industry is moving to the containerizing applications using Docker. There are other competitors to Dockers, but we'll be using Docker only. We'll get to know how continuous integration is done. So it's like whenever a developer is pushing the code in the repository, then a new build should get immediately created. This is the power of continuous integration. Then we'll be using Ansible scripts for configuration management as well as the continuous deployment. In the end, we'll be setting up Zabbix monitoring using the Zabbix agent that are placed on the different servers. In the whole project, we'll be getting to know what is DevOps, how CI/CD are implemented, how DevOps CI/CD lifecycle can be made as per the industry standards. That's it. So as part of this project, so we are trying to elaborate the concept of DevOps through a case study. So there is an e-commerce company that wants to adopt DevOps practices and hence wants to build a complete DevOps CI/CD lifecycle. So as part of this case study, we'll use various DevOps tools to implement the same. So following scenarios will be covered as part of this case study. We'll be setting up the source code management. Like earlier I said, like we'll be setting up a Git repository using GitHub. Then how continuous integration can be done using Jenkins. As I told you, like there shouldn't be a lag in the way like a developer is continuously developing the software and is pushing it to the Git repository, then the build related to it should get, or you can say like it should get continuously created. So this can be done using Jenkins, and this is what we call as continuous integration. Then we'll be implementing deployment in Docker containers. So we'll be using a strategy for that. You'll get to know in the later sections. Then how continuous deployment can be done using Ansible. In the end, we'll be using Zabbix for the monitoring purpose. In the end, we'll be using Zabbix, and there will be concluding our whole DevOps lifecycle. Well, we are including most part of the DevOps lifecycle, but it's not limited to these things only. There are many tools available, and it totally depends, or you can say totally differs as per the requirement. So we are trying to take the most important tools that are widely used. You can use this case study and add those tools as per your requirement. So let's start with the project.